Next up we have Brother Hamza Tzortzis, who is an international public speaker on Islam. He is a writer with articles, essays and commentaries on political philosophy and philosophy of religion. He's not letting me continue.
I'm sorry. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام To proceed, I do apologize. I wasn't expecting this. What a brave sister. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, may Allah Azza wa Jal grant all the sisters strength of Iman, Sakina in this life and in the hereafter. I've been told to speak just for a few minutes about this topic concerning statistics and maybe the psychology behind the whole domestic violence and domestic abuse issue. Now, concerning the stats, it's quite shocking that 18%, this is according to the Home Office, 18% of all violent crime is actually domestic violence and domestic abuse. Significantly, there is a huge social impact where, especially in the UK, it costs £3.8 billion a year to deal with domestic abuse and domestic violence issues. Significantly, we have 1 in 4 women in this country being victims of some form of domestic violence and abuse. And by the way, domestic violence and abuse is not just about physical abuse, as you could hear from the sister. It's emotional, it's psychological, and it affects a whole range of psychological issues and dispositions, such as self-esteem, such as confidence, and you start to blame yourself. In the UK, there are at least 2 women killed each week with regards to domestic violence. So every week 2 women are killed in this country, and it's related to domestic abuse and violence. And the police receive a call every minute concerning domestic violence or domestic abuse. So we see these are the statistics. Now, sometimes I hate just quoting statistics because what happens is it basically makes the discussion very abstract. It doesn't make it very human. It's all about numbers and figures, and sometimes numbers and figures don't make much sense to us. So I think it was very important for the sister to articulate her case or articulate her experiences, because it contextualizes these numbers, because we don't want them to just to be abstract things. Now, so that's the statistics, that's the kind of background to the domestic violence and abuse. But I want to get down to the psychology of it a bit, just to see, why do we have this problem in the non-Muslim and Muslim community? And I think today is evident of this as well, because may Allah Azza wa Jal bless Noor, because we should be having 1,000 people in this room, backed by every single student of knowledge in this country and all of the ulama. Because frankly, and I know this from my own experience, when there are domestic violence issues and you speak to some ulama in this country, they think, oh, just be quiet. It's a marital issue, leave it to them. And this is shocking. And we have to, not only do we have to, it is necessary for us to do something, because in psychology there's this concept called permission giving, or the social norm. Now, what is the social norm? The social norm is this social psychological reference point when the individual in society is not very certain about things. They don't know where to go, they don't know what decision to make, or they don't know what to believe, or whatever the case may be. It's based on a lack of certainty. So from a human instinctive perspective, we go to the social norm because it's a greater will, it's a collective. Now, if the social norm in the Muslim community in Britain is one that basically says, it's alright, it's a marital thing, you know, it's part of our culture now, it's not an issue. Yeah, religion said it's really bad, but you know, we could deal with it, and don't speak about it too much because you're going to create fitna, yeah? And this creates a social norm, and this is why you see many Muslims even today, they insert themselves into that social norm, and it affects their disposition. It affects their inclinations, because we're social animals, and we don't live in a bubble, we live in a society. We don't live in a cave, and we interact with human beings, and we're affected by that social norm, okay? And this is why it's very important for us to change that social norm by really supporting groups like Noor. Because I am really, really happy that I was even given the opportunity to speak about this issue. I've never spoken about this issue. And to make almost like a categorical statement that not only myself but the organization I represent, the Islamic Education and Research Academy, we categorically condemn all forms of domestic violence and abuse. And going back to the social norm, we need to now create a better social norm, or deconstruct this social norm that is very passive and not doing anything, and really be beacons of light for the rest of the community. And the only way to do that is by getting the influentials on board. By really lobbying the ulama and the students of knowledge and the people who have influence in our society. This reminds me of a thinker called Vivian Burr. She's a social constructionist. She wrote the book Social Constructionism, published by Routledge. And she discussed this concept of how do you construct these social norms. And she really focused on language. And she said, you know, even our use of language can affect your psychological disposition and how you act and do things. And she actually used the word love. She said, you know, when you think of love, what do you think? And for many of us, love is just an internal feeling. This is why in cases of domestic violence, when they're taken by the police, what would the man say? He would say, but I love her really. Whereas if you go 200-300 years ago, love was more of a behavior, especially in the Greek culture where I'm from. For example, my gran even now would say to me, Ela edo na se agapiso ligo, which means, come here, let me love you for a bit. It was a behavior, okay? And this is in line, I believe, in my humble limited reading, in line with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because didn't he say, if you love someone, tell them, express it? Didn't he say the way to spread that love is to what? Spread the salam, the peace, and the greeting of peace is an action? Didn't he also say in another prophetic tradition, the way to spread love is to give gifts? So you could see that love from this perspective is more of a behavior rather than an internal feeling. It's both. As we know in the Islamic tradition, if we read the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Ghazali, that Islam is not just about, you know, the external, it's the internality, and it comes together. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we really need to create that social norm, and if it means we have to raise our voice a little bit more, and if it means that we have to put our foot down collectively, then we should do this. Because, you know, first and foremost, we don't want to have another conference next year, obviously, because the whole point, the raison d'etre, the reason for existence of Noor is to eliminate domestic violence, isn't it, from that perspective? But if we have to have another conference, then we should have a much bigger one, and you know, I'll give my support in any way I can, and we should all give our support because it's a huge issue. So this was the social norm. We really need to do something. The other thing is from a spiritual perspective. You see, all of these manifestations of negativity is all about the ego, the nafs. And the ulama would look at the nafs from an inductive perspective. What does induction mean? They'll look at certain patterns of the nafs by experience with other people and looking at human beings. And interestingly, what does the nafs want to do? It always wants to be right. It never wants to be wrong. It always wants to dominate, and it never wants to be dominated. This is the nature of the nafs. And I think a lot of these domestic violence issues are a symptom of our underlying cause, which generally is that we haven't dealt with the biggest spiritual issue. Because we think a lot of Islam is just wearing the topi and growing the beard. Yeah, don't goats have beards? No? Yeah, I mean, no, we know we have to do it because there's an underlying emotional, spiritual issue. It's obedience. It's mahabba, it's love for Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it's not intrinsically, it's just dead protein. Yeah? So the point I'm trying to say is this whole thing is an ego issue. And frankly, the Muslim men, we have egos. We have huge egos. And it all stems to the nafs. And this is why the Quran, if we engage with the Quran, it really solves the problem. Because it says to you, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? You could even wipe your own backside when you're 1 year old or 6 months old or a month. You couldn't feed yourself. Even before that, you would despise fluid. Yeah? And now you think you could like hit a woman or hit another human being, hit a creature? Who are you? How dare you? So the Quran is quite categorical, going straight to the issue. Hence it asks the question, have you not seen the one who takes his own desires as his ilah, as his object of worship? Interestingly, the Quran also talks about death. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةَ الْمَوْتِ. You're going to be one buffet. You're just dust. You came from dust, you're going to be dust. And you could think you could like treat people with harm. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ say there is no harming and no reciprocating of harm? So we need to deal with the spiritual issue as well, because it's good to have legal processes, to have institutions to help our sisters, but we have to go to the root of the problem. No more patchwork solutions. Go to the root, and the root, I believe, is not only a social one, but a spiritual one. It's about the nafs and ego. And frankly, our ulama and our students of knowledge should stop writing books on wudu. I mean, how many books of wudu do we need? I mean, for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, we have thousands of students of knowledge from Medina and Mecca in this country, and many of them just talk about wudu. Fine, it's a worship, I'm not belittling it, wallahi I'm not, it's the most important thing, it's our reason for existence. But if the gap of knowledge has been fulfilled, don't reinvent the wheel, okay? Let's deal with things that there are issues. This is why we give so much credence and we give so much love to the ulama who are seen as the revivers. What about the revivers of this issue, of the issue of really stamping out that ego, yeah? In a very, Quranic way. Throwing a hadith at someone won't do that. You have to really try to make them internalize it. I don't know how to do it, I'm not a scholar in any shape or form, but we need that. Finally, the other issue I believe is parenting. I would probably guarantee I did psychology at university, from my very limited reading on this, is that these people who have issues and they're violent, it's about their parents. They didn't have love at home. I'm telling you, they didn't have love at home. And this is one of the biggest issues in our community, wallahi, ikhwan and akhawat, brothers and sisters. Our Muslim community, and I travel all around the world, I see at least millions, I've seen nearly 1 million plus Muslim students in the world. And I have seen some patterns. And these patterns are, they've got an inferiority complex, they have low self-esteem, they have no confidence, they can't articulate a positive case for their own tradition, they have lost this chivalry, this manliness, not in an egotistical way, but from a Quran and Sunnah perspective. Yeah, I'm telling you, the women are more manly than the men. I'm telling you, especially in the talks that we give, with there's far more women, there's less men, women are more active, women are more intelligent as well. It's a sign of Qiyamah, man. But the point is that this, and all of this self-esteem and confidence issue stems about parenting. And communication issues. You have brothers who are practicing Muslims, they have all the gear, yeah? They're the Islamo men, yeah? They run around, they do masjid this, talk this, that. But they won't speak to their mother for 6 months. Allahu Akbar. One brother took a piece of bread from another brother's beard and they wouldn't speak to each other for 3 months. And why do we have these small, silly, ridiculous issues? Don't get me wrong, there's khair in the ummah, according to the Prophet ﷺ, and we know this. But there's a pattern going on, and I really think it's about parenting. And I always ask this, no matter what talk I give, whether it's about abstract philosophy, Quranic discourse, whatever, I say to them, when was the last time you said to your parents you love them and they said to you that they love you? I'm telling you, in Asian communities particularly, they have never heard that word at home almost. They haven't heard the word at home. And this is a crisis. It's a huge crisis in our families, in our communities. It has to start with love, muhabba. It's so important. Study any type of psychology. If you're behaviorist, cognitive behaviorist, psychoanalytical, anything. It has to start with love. Hence, the Quran tells us this when He spoke about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, if you weren't merciful and kind and loving to them, they would have run away. Now this tells us that the mechanism to install Islam is what? Is that compassion, is that kindness. Especially, that was the commentary of Al-Makshari. So the point is, we need to reinstill this at home, because if we want to change the future generations, having legal processes and organizations is just going to deal with the symptoms, not the cause. So we must be causal in this, and the way to do that is support organizations like Noor. So we lobby, we almost make a huge kind of impact on the influences in our community, inshallah ta'ala. I'm here, whatever I can do, I'll support Noor. And we must protect our sisters, they're an honor, and it's an honor that must be protected. We must fear Allah Azza wa Jal concerning our sisters. And what can I say? What can I say? It was very moving, so I do apologize for the beginning of this talk. But hopefully I've given you some ideas, not as an edifying practice, not for me to teach you something, because I don't have no right to teach anyone, but just to plant some seeds, to think, right, how we're going to go about dealing with the symptoms. Because this is really, really important. So, ikhwan, akhwat, may Allah Azza wa Jal bless you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala support all the sisters who are suffering. By the way, there are some brothers who suffer from domestic violence as well. Apparently 1 in 6 men, according to the Home Office, are victims of domestic violence as well. So it's not only a female issue, but obviously in the Muslim community it's predominantly a female issue. But whoever is victim of domestic violence and abuse, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them, grant them sakina in this life, in the hereafter, protect them. And we must allow these sisters to have an avenue to speak and have a voice, because for them to be confined in this prison of domestic abuse and violence, in this cycle of domestic abuse and violence without being able to express and get help is just a damning indictment against the Muslim community, and we need to stand up. We need to stand up. So there's much more to say, but may Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair to Brother Hamza for his advice.